Welcome back. Panelists here, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the Washington Post, Eugene Robinson. Susan Page, the Washington Bureau Chief of USA Today. Danielle Pletka, the Senior Vice President at the American Enterprise Institute. And NBC News Senior Political Editor, Mark Murray. Of course, my partner every morning on First Read. Welcome all. Let's start with Supreme Court. What we're learning this morning is that the Senate Republicans have a preference, and they would prefer less of a fight. Raymond Kethledge, Thomas Hardiman, Susan Page. Of the final four, those two are who Mitch McConnell prefers, essentially because Brett Kavanaugh is too much of a paper trail, apparently, and Amy Barrett would spark a culture war. That's essentially the message McConnell is sending.
So here's what's amazing. Brett Kavanaugh's biggest problem is that he is associated with the last Republican president, right? With George W. Bush. Who knew that would be such a liability with the next Republican president? And the argument for Amy Barrett is the same argument for and against, that she'd spark a culture war, because there are some Republicans who think that would be great. And the question is, will President Trump think that as well? She's 46 years old. That's an asset. You name her to the court and she gets confirmed. She could be there for 4 decades.
Eugene Robinson, let me put up each one of these has a conservative concern about them. Sort of as Susan mentioned with Brett Kavanaugh, it's the Bush connections. One administration official called him the low-energy Jeb Bush pick. Raymond Kethledge, Ann Coulter calls, I think, an open border zealot. Amy Barrett, the culture war, and the question is that good or bad? You could have that discussion. And then the fear on Hardiman is he a Roberts or a Souter? And this one. So it seems like conservatives have a way of killing any of them here.
Right. So what are they what are they looking for? I mean, some sort of, ironclad guarantee that they, in writing, that we will uphold the entire conservative agenda as you see it, by the way, not as other conservatives might see it. I think if conservatives would take a breath and look at these candidates, they see they're all really conservative, as far as we know, as far as we can tell from anything they've written. I mean, there's nothing that I've seen pointed out in any of their writings that indicates they're closet liberals. Now, when judges get to the Supreme Court, guess what? They take their job seriously, and they actually look at the cases, and sometimes they don't decide in a way that their prior ideological leanings would indicate.
Mark Murray, Thomas Hardiman, I think, has an advantage over all of the others with President Trump for one reason.
Yeah.
Thomas Hardiman's relationship with the president's sister. Explain.
Yeah, those relationships do matter, particularly with President Trump. And, the argument for also Thomas Hardiman is that he doesn't have that kind of paper trail. And to me, the biggest question about the Supreme Court pick is who ends up having the most pressure on them? Is it someone like Senator Susan Collins and Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski? Or is it the Joe Manchin, the Democratic of West Virginia, Joe Donnelly of Indiana, and the Hardiman Kethledge with not a big paper trail? They're more bland jurists. The pressure would probably be on the Manchins and the Donnellys. But all of a sudden, if you are talking about Amy Barrett, who has said some explicit things about abortion and on the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act, the pressure certainly then goes to Collins and Murkowski.
Danielle, it seems as if the president's got a choice to make. Does he want to win or a fight? That's what McConnell's presenting him, right?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And the president, I suspect, doesn't really care whether it's a win or a fight. He wants somebody who he can sit down and have a beer with. Isn't that what the reporting said yesterday?
Well, that's not Amy Barrett, apparently, because we're told it didn't go well.
I have no understanding of why it might not have gone well or what the president is asking each of these individual nominees, but I think you said the right thing. They're all conservatives. They're all qualified people. The fact that someone has a paper trail, to me, it should not be disqualifying. You want people who are not afraid to make tough decisions, people who are serious about their positions and about the rule of law.
Let's talk about what the Democrats are supposed to do here, Eugene. Look, I guess the question is, what kind of fight do they need to put up in order to make this a voting issue? Because it seems as if it's never been a voting issue for the left the way it is for the right.
Look, I don't know if the Supreme Court is ever going to be a voting issue for the left as it is for the right. Unless and until Roe v. Wade is overturned, and then it might be. Roe is really what sparked, I think, the conservative, not obsession because it's real, but the conservative focus on the Supreme Court and the fact that that is a voting issue for so many conservatives. And then it's sort of other issues sort of hang off of that. But I think Roe v. Wade is the central trunk of that tree, and so I don't think it's going to get there unless something happens to Roe. I think they do need to fight because the base expects them to fight. I mean, even people who are now, they're going to vote, they're excited, but they want to see a fight.
Yeah, they want somebody to climb up the Statue of Liberty.
But isn't part of the problem here that the Democrats are kind of stuck in the last decade? They want this. They're trying to make this a priori a fight about Roe versus Wade and about abortion. And that's not what this is going to be about at the end of the day. What's interesting to me is that the courts have become so important in the last few years because the Congress has stopped doing anything, because the executive branch has so overreached both under Obama and now Trump. People are going to say, it surprises me that the Democrats don't want to get with the 21st century and recognize the power of the courts.
You know, this is a good thing for Republicans in the short term. This is going to help them with turnout. Either way, they're going to have a big fight. Republicans and conservatives that vote on the court. You might want to watch out what you wish for over the long term. If you are credited with overturning Roe v. Wade or with accepting a lot of new state restrictions on abortion rights.
With 5 men, by the way, doing it.
Yeah.
Especially if it's not Amy Barrett, right?
You could
5
pay
men.
a big cost with women voters, with millennials who are pretty clear on where they stand on this issue. And over the long term, this could be the seeds of real problems for the GOP going down the road.
But this all comes down to winning elections. And if the Republicans have been much better in recent elections than Democrats have been, and you ask, Senator Durbin, what was the biggest mistake that Democrats made with Merrick Garland? Their biggest mistake was getting routed in the 2014 midterm elections, which allowed Mitch McConnell to take over the Senate. And actually, Democrats held on to a bare majority. You would have Supreme Court Justice Merrick Garland. And so being able to win in midterm elections and presidential elections, that's what gets you control of the court.
Well, go.
Well said.
You guys, then, okay, but what does Joe Donnelly do? Because the base, he's the only one of these three that actually has a Democratic base to worry about. I think Manchin and Heitkamp don't.
I'm very much in the Mark Murray camp in terms of winning elections being what Democrats need to do. They're out of power. They're out of the White House. They're out of control of both.
So then
houses
the
of Congress.
advice.
They're out of control of state legislature. They need to win elections. So you let Joe Donnelly vote however Joe Donnelly has to vote.
There you go. So what you're saying is, if the choice is
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, if she were to say she would vote her way, she can have her issues. Let Joe Donnelly have his issues and let him vote his way.
I'm going to pause it there. We got a lot of foreign policy to cover, and I can't wait to hear what Danielle thinks of what happened in North Korea. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.